Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Vincent Manago, and we're going to talk about his growing up in Brooklyn in the, I guess, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and his great book about Brooklyn, The Third Attic. So welcome, Vincent. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Bob. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. So, there are, as I was reading the book, there were so many similarities and places that we kind of have in common, even though I grew up in Queens and you grew up in Brooklyn. And so, it was very interesting from that aspect. And just, you see the Myrtle Avenue L behind me?
I see it. Yes, yes. In the
That
book, I have
picture,
some pictures.
that was the
Yes,
last train out of Brooklyn, out of that L.
yes.
And the picture was taken by my father, who worked for the Daily News.
Really? I
Yeah.
have I have some pictures from somebody who went to the same school I did, Bishop Loughlin, and he took some pictures. I think it was in the mid '60s or late '60s. Was it, Bob? When was that? When was the last train?
Yeah,
Early-
I'm gonna guess this was probably maybe 64, 65, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think I have one or two of those in the book that he took. That he took. So your dad took the picture that I'm looking at. Do you know what street it is, Bob? What the cross street is?
I think it was the end of the line, but I'm not. I can't be positive. So
Okay,
wherever
that
the
would be
L ended. Yeah, probably J
J,
Street.
J Street. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he worked Brooklyn. Oh, probably I want to say from through the 50s into probably 67, 68, maybe a little bit later, and then he
Uh-huh.
worked in Queens.
Okay, yeah.
But I thought you'd get a kick out of that since you talk about the L a
Do I
lot.
love uh, uh, the fact? One of my girlfriends lived on Myrtle Avenue, right under the L, and as you know, every time the train went by, strangers who weren't from the neighborhood would say, "What is that noise?" But those of us who lived there, it was just part of the environs of the neighborhood. It was part of it. It was
Yeah,
fine.
I had a good friends who lived right near the L. I think it was the J line in Queens, and they were right at a turn. So every time that train made a turn, it was almost like they were
Just
going to come into the building.
yes. Oh God, yes, yes, yes. I
uh,
remember those.
so let's talk a little bit about your family roots.
Yes.
I know mom and dad were both Italian, right? So do you know where they came from in Italy?
Well, my parents were both born here in America.
Right.
Uh, I, I have, I have, I brought some pictures because I didn't know whether I did this at the library when I gave, talks about the book. This is my paternal grandfather, Vincent, the big guy. He would be from Calabria, okay, and my grandma, they're from Calabria, okay, and my maternal grandparents are from Nusco, which uh, is a town near Naples. So my dad's family is from the south, and my mom's is from Naples. Sort of. Now, as I said, both of my parents were born here in America, uh, but unfortunately, my mom, she was born in 1918 during the pandemic, that pandemic, all right, the
Mm.
Spanish flu, and her mother died 3 months after my mother was born. So at that point, my grandpa had five children. They were near, I guess, Altoona, Pennsylvania at the time, and so he had to go back to Italy, where his a mom and sister helped raise, the five kids. Again, my mother was an infant, so she and one brother were born here in America right at the beginning of World War II. My uncle and my mom came back to America. My grandpa wanted them out of Italy because the war was about to start. And since they had the right to come back as American citizens, naturally born American citizens, they came back. They came here. And he wanted them here so that they would have the ability at some point to bring the other brothers over, and they did. Into the 50s, my other uncles were able to come by in, and now what happened is my mom and uncle settled in the parish of St. Lucie, which is, which is the background for the book, and that's where she met my dad, and they were married in 1943.
And that's fabulous. So that's great that you have both sets of grandparents there with great photos. I mean, those are fabulous photos.
I'm big into that end of it, which whenever I talk to groups about the book, I always say, not everybody is an author, and I certainly am not an author. I'm a CPA by practice, and that's my living. But I wanted to do this after I had retired because I think it's important to pass down stories from your family. I think that's how your family learns, from generation on to generation. And I think pictures are a part of that. So I have many, many family pictures. As you see from the book is, in fact, even on the covers, Bob, it's, replete with pictures. I think that's important.
And I'm not an author either, and I've just kind of finished mine up, and I did send it over to SUNY to take a look at it. We'll see if they want to publish it. Otherwise, I may do self-publish. But same thing. I mean, I have a lot of pictures from my family from the 20s, the 30s, 40s, and even some movies, because my father was in the business.
Oh, that's great. Yes. Oh, well, yeah, your dad, yes. You should. That's right. You probably do have a lot of pictures. Oh, that would be great, Bob. That really would. Yes. I'm sure your posterity will like that.
But I agree with you. And that's one of the reasons why I do this is it's very important to keep that going. And, the further along we get, the generation behind us is not so interested, and the one behind them aren't interested at all. So,
you know what I often think, Bob? I think that our generation, let's say I was born in the 40s, like, mid 40s, but you're probably younger than me, but those of us from the 50s and 60s, that era, I think, is the link between the old generation who came over from Italy, the Italians, early 1900, and of course, the future, children, grandchildren. And I think we are the link. And that's why I want to keep up all the, customs and traditions that we had. I want to expose it to them. They're not going to practice it 100% as we probably do, but at least they'll be exposed. I think that's important, Bob.
It's definitely important. And, it was a completely different time. So let's talk a little bit about growing up Italian in Brooklyn. I grew up Italian in Queens. But, the games with it, we played the same. The food we ate was the same. The nicknames were the same.
Oh, yes. All those nicknames I listed in the book. Yes. Yeah. They were funny. Yeah. Everybody had a nickname. Yes. Yeah. Because I say in the book, that's because, especially with the boys, I mean, the girls didn't really have nicknames in our neighborhood, but the boys all did, because there were so many people with the same first name. There were Vinnies and Sals and Joes and Anthonys and Roberts and Johns. That was it. After that, so you had to distinguish between one Vinny and another Vinny, or one Sal and another Sal. So you had a nickname. Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with PhilItaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
And as you were talking about playing Ringalivio and hide and seek, and we had stoop ball and stick ball, and the difference between stick ball where I played it and where you played it, we actually played it in the schoolyard, where there was a wall behind us, and you would pitch at the wall.
Yes,
where you guys hit it. You guys played sewer to sewer.
We were in the street. Yes, in the street. We played a lot more punch ball in our neighborhood. That was really the mainstay game. It was punch ball. We did some stick ball, and then after punch ball, we graduated into basketball. That was the those were the games I really loved.
So for the
ball too.
so for the uneducated, what's punch ball and what's box ball?
Okay, punch ball. Instead of using a bat, you use your hand. Okay, you get not a hard ball, but a rubber ball. We used to call them pimple balls or spaldings, but the pimple ball was the best. You would toss it up and slap it with your hand. But I mean, hit far. You could hit a half a block, and so that was punch ball because we didn't have a place to play hard ball, and we didn't have bats and balls. I come from a relatively poor working class. Everybody worked. There was nobody. When I say poor, I don't mean in the street poor. I don't mean that kind of poor. I mean we had nothing other than an apartment building rent, and they paid the rent, food, and that was it. So we played with what we had. We also played. Now, not too many people did this, but we also played something called paper ball. When we couldn't afford the 15 cents for the pimple ball, we rolled up some old newspaper, put some string around it, tied it tight, and that was the ball. Of course, that wouldn't bounce, but it got us to what we wanted to do: hit the ball, run the bases, that sort of thing. We played basically on the sidewalk of a main street, Park Avenue, which is where I lived. And we played across the street from where I lived, Bob, was a big factory called Stimson's. Mm-hmm. And so there were no people there other than those entering and exiting at either lunchtime or dinner. After that, the sidewalk was clear. So that's where we played, but it was on a main thoroughfare.
So the first coincidence that I want to talk to you a little bit about was you mentioned a welder at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and my uncle Anthony was a welder at the Brooklyn Navy Yard during World War II.
Yes. In the book I start off with, I was born right near the end of World War II, a year before the war ended, in a hospital called Cumberland Hospital, where my mother could see the Navy Yard. Okay, so I was born there where the battleships for the war were being built. They built aircraft carriers, battleships, every possible. Yeah. It was the largest, at the time, the largest Navy Yard in the world, Bob. During the war, they employed 70,000 people. So it was the neighborhood employer. Okay, and people came from other neighborhoods, and they all came on the Myrtle Avenue L, Bob. They rode the Myrtle Avenue L to Franklin Avenue, which was the exit, which was the stop, and they would walk down to the Navy Yard from there. And across the street from, again, our neighborhood was basically factories, warehouses, and a lot of tenement buildings. But the tenement buildings were all built in the early 1900s, late 1800s. So we lived in very old buildings. My younger sisters don't remember this, but when I was young, let's say 5, 6, 7 years old, we had no heat in our apartment. We had no steam heat. My sisters don't remember that. We had an icebox. Okay, it was that kind of a neighborhood, Bob. But again, I wouldn't change a thing, Bob. I loved my family, my neighborhood, my friends. It was the best thing that could ever happen to me.
So at that time, was it completely an Italian neighborhood where you lived? Or?
Almost all of us were Italian. What had happened is, as you know, the Italians came to America late 1800s, most of them early 1900s. My grandpa, Vincent, my father's father, came here in 1904. I'm named for him. And he and the others in the neighborhood. Again, my neighborhood, I have a map. I'll show it to you if you're interested. It is about maybe 3 or 4 square miles. In that place, basically all Italian, Bob. There were some Irish, but most of the Irish had moved south of Myrtle Avenue. that picture you have in the background, they moved south because the church there was St. Patrick's and nice private homes, all south of Myrtle Avenue. North of Myrtle Avenue, where I lived, Park Avenue, Flushing, was, again, the factories, warehouses, and a lot of tenement buildings, apartment buildings, and row houses. Not huge apartment buildings, Bob. Not huge. If I can just, buildings like this, Bob. Buildings like this. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that?
Yeah,
okay.
See it good.
All along. Yeah. This is where I live. This was my apartment building. Only 3 or 4 stories, most of them. Mine was 3, and they were row houses. These houses just were the same, all the way down the line. Okay, and those are the houses we lived in, and there was not much room. Everybody lived in very, very small apartments. In ours, we were 5: my mother, father, and my 2 sisters and myself. So, but basically, we were Italian, and that's why. Again, I don't know if this. I explained it correctly, but my grandfather and his friends, again, he started in 1904 when he came here, they petitioned the Bishop of Brooklyn for their own Italian church. St. Patrick's was just south of Myrtle Avenue on Kent and Myrtle. The Italians didn't want to go there. They didn't feel welcome. The priest didn't speak Italian. They wanted a place where they could have a priest that spoke Italian, hear confessions in Italian, have sermons in Italian. So Bishop McDonald, the second bishop of Brooklyn, gave them permission to build their own church. And he bought the land for them on Kent Avenue. It was a block and a half away from St. Patrick's. That's why it was called a national parish. It couldn't have boundaries because it would be interfering then with St. Patrick's. It was called I believe it's the second national parish in the country. I think St. Anthony's in Manhattan was the first Italian national parish, and St. Lucie, the place where we came from, is the second. And it took my grandpa and his friends 10 years, Bob, to build the church. They raised money to do the things they couldn't do, but a lot of the men were very handy back in that time. You know that, Bob. And they did what they could. Some were bricklayers. They helped with, after work, at night, weekends, they did as much as they could. And it took them 10 years to build a church.
Yeah, and I think a fabulous part of that whole story was the Jewish man who helped.
Oh, yes.
That stuff doesn't happen these days.
No, it was. Do you want me to tell that story quickly?
Yeah.
Okay. These were the Uberalls. Okay, Solomon and Esther. This is their picture, Bob. Can you see it? Am I doing that right?
Yeah. I can see it.
Solomon and Esther Uberall. When St. Lucy's was being built, okay, the Italians still wanted a place to go to church, so they rented or bought a nearby storefront so that they could have mass on Sunday there. Okay, a priest was assigned to the parish, but he had a place to live, but there was no church, so they had mass in this storefront. They had to buy it, okay, and they put down a small amount of money because they were spending their money on the church, and they got a huge mortgage for them at the time, to be paid in 1913. Now this is 1904. They presumed by 1913 the place would be built. We could sell the building and then satisfy the mortgage. By 1913, they hadn't got the marble from Italy yet for the main altar, so the church couldn't be built. The mortgage was due, and a Father Caruana from Malta was assigned as the pastor. He had to pay the mortgage, or they would lose the storefront. Just to make it quick, he went for a walk in the neighborhood trying to raise money. He couldn't. He went into the Uberall store. Now the Uberalls, Esther and Solomon, were a newly married couple, and they had a notion store on Myrtle Avenue, Bob, Myrtle and between Kent and Franklin. And again, this is 1913, and he went in and Solomon said to Father George, Father, why are you so sad? And he explained to him he needed the money. He needed $500, which to them was a lot of money at the time, Bob. He said, or we're going to lose the place where we say Mass on Sunday. Solomon says, I'll take care of it, Father. Father George just says, okay, assuming that, that Solomon was just being nice. Esther said to him, where are we going to get the money? But they did. Solomon went from family member to family member, and he hocked their wedding gifts. He got the $500. He lent it to Father George. He paid off the mortgage, and every Monday morning after Sunday collection, Father George would go and pay off part of that $500 debt to Solomon and Esther. Now, St. Lucy's was built in 1914. Father George was transferred to St. Leo up in Corona. I think you know Corona, Bob.
Yeah, yes, okay. That's where we're from. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that on one of your podcasts. And Solomon and Esther stayed at the store. Okay. Now, Solomon unfortunately died in around 1920, right at the end of World War I. He had a heart attack as a young man and died. Esther continued with the store, the notion store. Her family helped her. Her children got older. But she and Father Caruana, of course, never saw each other again. In 1939 and 1940, in that era, Esther was getting many letters from Solomon's family in Austria. Solomon was from Austria. She was from Russia. And pleading with her to try to get them into America because there was this madman talking about gas chambers and things. So they had to get out of Austria. She didn't know what to do. She tried, but all the cords were filled. She goes to Washington, D.C. She was very determined to get her family here, his family here. And she got no place. As she was about to leave, somebody told her, if you could get your family into Cuba, okay, Cuba will take refugees, but you need someone there who can provide for them, house them, clothe them, feed them, because they cannot be, wards of the state. Cuba will not allow that. So she was elated for a while. She gets on the train to come back to Brooklyn and realizes she doesn't know anybody in Cuba. She went directly to St. Lucy's Church then, and she spoke to Father DeLiberty. He was the new pastor. Now this is 1940-ish. He said, I'll write a letter to the papal nuncio down in Cuba. I'll cable him and I'll let you know. A few days later, he says to her, get on the plane and go down. They're ready to meet with you. She gets on a plane, goes down to Cuba. As she gets off the plane, Bob, she sees an altar boy dressed in his altar attire approaching her with a bouquet of flowers. And she's a little puzzled. So quizzically, she looks up and she sees an ecclesiastically robed, man dressed in red with his arms stretched out. And he says, Esther Uberall, don't you remember me? And it was Father Caruana. She broke down into tears. Well, this is Father Caruana. He is now an archbishop. Okay, he's an archbishop, and he is the papal nuncio in Cuba, with a direct link, obviously, to Rome. But even better than that, as the papal nuncio, he was working for the Secretary of State, who happened to be Eugenio Pacelli, who in 1939 became Pope Pius XII. So he had a direct link right to the Pope. And they were able to get 24 of Solomon's relatives out of Austria into Cuba. And Father Caruana provided for them, housed them. He gave them kosher food. And Esther was elated. In 1951, 52, as I recall, he became very ill and came back to America. And he died here, and she went to visit him, I think down in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, someplace like that. I think it was Philadelphia, in a hospital there. And he gave her a relic of St. Francis de Sales. And she wrote an article on that. And in my neighborhood, Bob, in that area where I come from, about 3 or 4 square miles, everybody knew of the Uberall story. Everybody. We were raised on this story. That's how important it was to our grandparents, that the Uberalls were so kind to them. And I don't know what you remember the book. In the ceiling of the church, they have these grates. These again, what you see there are the skylights in the ceiling, which is the floor of the second attic. Remember that we had a first attic, a second attic, and we were searching for the third attic. That's the story. In the middle, you'll see these grates. Okay, these are air grates. If you could look very, very closely, I didn't realize this when I was a kid, but I just did now that I was writing the book. In the middle of the grate, they put the Star of David as a commemoration to the Uberalls for their kindness. The Italians never forgot that. And I just see that as such a kind thing that they did. We really need more of that today, as you know, Bob. That was really a wonderful thing that the Uberalls did.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the incredible part of the whole story is that 25 years later,
World War II, right?
Yes, I'm a true believer in it. There aren't coincidences like that. There's some kind of force that I've heard so many stories, about people finding things and all of that. Yes. I don't know if you heard the St. Lucie story from Italy or not, but just real quick, I've said it once before. The guy who helped me with my ancestry in Naples, he took a client to a church in Italy. I was walking down the street with this client, and this old woman comes out of nowhere and says, "Who are you?" Right? And he explains that the family was from there, and she says, "Oh," and she pulls a key out of her dress and says, "Come with me." Yeah. And they go into this chapel, and it's St. Lucie's, and they had at the base of the statue, people would send things from America or around the world that was originally supposed to be melted down and everything like that.
Yes.
And the story is you're supposed to pick something up and hold it to your eyes and get a blessing. Well, he picks it up, and it was his great grandparents' names.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
The guy said, I can't believe this. And Alessandra said, "Can't believe what?" And he said, "These are my great grandparents. They had sent something to America, to that church." And 80 years, 100 years later, this guy picks it up.
Yeah. Well, part of the book, maybe I didn't say it outright, but one of the themes in the book, I have a couple of themes, but one of the themes in the book is that there are no accidental meetings in life.
Yes, right.
There are none.
Right.
Every meeting is a purpose. Okay. And I go through some of the meetings in my life that at the time may have seemed accidental, but turned out to be so influential in the rest of my life, so important. And they really made me who I am today. A lot of those accidental meetings, and I discuss a couple of them in the book. So I'm a true believer of that, Bob. That I think as you get older, you see more, and you say, "Boy, look at how this happened." Well, St. Lucie, as you know, is known for for curing eye.
Yeah, she's a patron saint of eyes.
Ailments, diseases. Yeah, that's why on the book cover I have her these replica items that were actually from her altar. The things you're talking about, Bob, we had at St. Lucie's when I was a young kid, very young, probably 8, 9, 10 years old. Because in 1954, they redid our church. It was at that point 50 years, and they redid. And the Monsignor at the time, Monsignor Dante, took away all these incidental things on the St. Lucie Chapel. There's a big chapel for St. Lucie with her shrine there. And they had a lot of these eye-type implements, replicas that people who were cured from eye disease after praying to St. Lucie left them there. And a lot of these have their names on them. And I have a couple of them, which he took up all off the altar. He didn't want that anymore. Again, it was a new age. And so a lot of that was gone. but it's the same kind of thing you're talking about. Same thing.
Yeah, yeah. So the third attic is fun because you know you talk about you and your mates roaming
Yes.
through the various parts of the church, and what intrigued me about that whole story is how you guys never got caught.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, uh, one of the odd things, Bob, is that again, as altar boys, we were all altar boys, okay, and this went on from generation to generation, okay. All the boys before us, the boys before them, all those in the age group of say, 11 to like 14, 15, in that age group, 11 to 13, 14. Those boys who were altar boys at the time, every group searched for the third attic. And then, after, when you're 15, 16, boys start to have other interests. They see girls in a different way. So the third attic becomes, secondary. But our group, me and my 5 friends, we found one day a large bunch of keys that must have been from an earlier time, okay, but they opened up so many doors, back doors into the church. So we had access to everything. And the worst part of the story is when we did our searching, and we searched days, weeks, months, years, Bob, we used candles, which was really kind of stupid when you think about it, but
Yeah,
we didn't have
I was thinking about that when I was reading it. I was like, these guys are crazy.
Yeah, but we were young kids, and we all felt, well, we're not gonna put anything on fire. But remember, the attics are all old wood and stuff.
Yeah.
We were lucky. We were lucky. And when we turned of age to stop looking, the younger kids behind us, the new altar boys, they took over looking. Generation to generation. It was just a thing that in our neighborhood, the story was that because we all knew that there were 2 attics. There was the primary attic and the secondary attic. And I showed you the second attic is really the ceiling of the church with the skylights. Mm-hmm. And the second attic is only maybe 4.5 to 5 feet deep. Okay. So when we were kids, we still had to hunch over as we were walking in there. And you could only walk on the main beams because in between the beams was the plaster, which was the painted ceiling of the church. So if you walked in the wrong place, you were in the church, okay? So we again were very careful. We mapped everything out. We looked behind. We looked at every inch of every place that you could possibly think of. Behind confessionals, we were looking for secret doors, passageways, corridors, anything that would lead us into the third attic. We were convinced from the stories that there were treasures in there. There were treasures. Material treasures. There was a story about being relics of St. Rita would be in there. And also there were stories that part of the building, part of the structure was from an old Protestant church where they had these rooms where they kept slaves that were the runaway slaves. Our area was known for that in Brooklyn, because then they could get on a boat right by where the Navy Yard is now. It wasn't then, and move on. So we had all these different stories. We didn't know what was true, but we were convinced that we were going to be the guys to find it. We mapped everything out. Unfortunately, we never did.
So did you
What's that?
when you got old, did you hand over the keys to the next generation altar boys, or?
No, we kept them. I have a lot of them. I still have a lot of them. They didn't have the access we had. That's why we felt that we would be the ones to find it, Bob, because we had access to everything. We went behind the choir loft. There are so many places that the church was big, and but in the end, as we got older, the 6 of us, we still stayed friends for a long time. A couple of guys two guys have now passed away. Two have moved out of state. So there's only me and my best man, Frankie, who live in the area now. But when we were younger, we used to get together and talk about how we should have done this differently, or if we had flashlights, it would have been different, you know, if we different ways that we would have approached it. But we were never sorry that we did what we did, because even though we didn't find material treasures, we didn't really find anything, but we amassed a treasure of friendship and camaraderie and the memories. We did everything together, Bob. The six of us. We were like brothers, and I love each of them like a brother. We were really great friends. We were true friends, as I call it in the book. We were true friends. So for us, it was great. I would do it all over again, Bob.
Yeah, no, it's a great story, and like I said, I can't believe you never got caught. I mean, I went to Catholic school, you know, grammar school, yes. High school, all of that stuff, and I would have got caught in a minute.
Yeah.
So another coincidence as I was going through the book, and you know, this is strange. You mentioned the night you had to fill in for the adoration, right? So what's odd about that? But I'll tell you what's odd about that. That very day I read that chapter. That night, my wife and I had been watching The Outlander on Stars. That very day, one of the main characters, the woman Claire, attended.
My wife loves her.
Yeah. She attended the adoration. So the day I read that chapter was the day that episode we watched on television.
Oh God, yeah. There were no coincidences.
Right, exactly. That's what I said to my wife. I said, I can't believe this. I just read this chapter in the book, and they're talking about the same thing on the show.
Yeah, that was a scary night in my life. Very scary. In fact, I put that story. What I do is every once in a while, I don't really advertise for the book, Bob, but what I do is I put stories from the book on the Facebook page, on the book's Facebook page, and I put that story on once. I get so many comments on that story. Of course, the biggest one I get is on the Uberall story. The Uberall story, everyone just loves that story. But I get comments on that, you know, nocturnal adoration night, one of the scariest nights of my life. But I had to do what I had to do. So it was something, again, very memorable, very memorable.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you meet your wife at the CYO dance in Whitestone?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in College Point, so I know the CYO very well.
It was called Cresthaven.
Yes, exactly, Cresthaven.
Cresthaven, yeah. If you want me just to explain the story quickly, you want me to do that, Bob?
Yeah, because that's another great story.
I was going out with a girl. I was in the Army Reserve, okay, and I had to go away for my 6 months active duty. A few months before I had to go away, in January 1967. A few months before that, I met a girl at the dance, and she came from the Bronx, and she was, I must say this, extraordinarily beautiful, absolutely stunning. So she and I were an item for a while, and then I had to go away to the Army, but she wanted something to remember me by while I was gone. She wanted my college ring. I gave her my ring, okay? And while I was away, she and I were communicating, and I had come to the conclusion I shouldn't be overwhelmed by her beauty and her stature, that she was not the girl for me. So I lied to her. I told her that my boss had written to me, and then when I got out of the service, I was going to be transferred to Virginia, and so that she should go out with other boys while I'm away. I came back in June, and I was moving on. I never called her. I didn't do anything. And my friends kept telling me, my 5 buddies, how stupid I was for not getting back my college ring. It's a gold ring. You're silly, get your ring back. it's not an engagement. It was a memento. I didn't want to call her. So they convinced me to do so. In September, I called her. We set up a date to go to meet her back at Crest Haven. Okay. So she came down with her girlfriends, and I was going to meet her there with my friends. That Sunday, it was a Sunday, I had an Army Reserve meeting. So my friends, called 5 o'clock, let's go. I said, no, I just got home. I got a shower. I'll meet you there. You guys go, and I'll meet you there. Now, I don't know if you remember Crest Haven, Bob, but they had two major dancing rooms. Mm-hmm. One was Latin type music, and one was more rock and roll, okay? So as one band played, the other was off, okay, back and forth. So as I got into the place, I'm alone, and I wanted to find my, my friends who I knew were there. I walked into the room where the music was playing, and I meet this girl, okay? And I saw her, okay, Marie was her name. And I said, oh, Marie, how you been? She said, I said, yeah, I'm back from Virginia for the weekend. I told her I was back home visiting my parents. And I said, and she said, she went into her purse, she got her ring, she gave me the ring. Now, while we were on the dance floor, we danced, okay? I figured, let's dance. So at the end of the dance, I felt so guilty for lying. And she was really a very, very nice girl, but just not the girl for me. I said, I'm going to find my friends, Marie. I'll see you later, okay? I'll come find you. And I, clumsily walked off the dance floor because I wanted to just, move on. And as I turned, I accidentally bumped into Carol, who's now my wife, okay? And that was like 54 years ago or something like that. We're married 53 years. And Carol, I bumped into, I'm sorry. So then we sat down, we got a Coke or something like that. And I've never left her since. Yeah. So again, an accidental meeting.
I'm going to say that there are no accidents. There are no accidents, yeah. Right? So where did she grow? Where did she grow up? Did she grow up in Whitestone, College Point?
Carol's from Flushing, Flushing, but her parents come from your old neighborhood, Bob, from Corona. Her father is from Corona. Her dad.
So what's her maiden name?
Buzzeo. Buzzeo.
Yeah.
Buzzeo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, Parkside's our favorite restaurant. I'm sure you know Parkside.
I know Parkside well. I haven't been there in quite some time.
Yeah.
Parkside.
Yeah.
My cousin Lou, who since passed away, was good friends with Tough Tony.
Oh, and he's still there. We were there just a few months ago.
I know he's still there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny Parkside story. When I was dating Marion, we had probably hadn't met. We were both married before. We probably weren't dating that long. I had a little MG convertible, and Parkside probably just opened at that time. This was like 82, 83, something like that. And I pull up in front of the Parkside, and there's no parking lot, right? So I park by Spaghetti Park, and I have the top down and everything, and I had an alarm on the car, but we get out, and I'm walking across the street, and Marion says, aren't you going to lock the car or put the top? And I said, nobody's going to touch the car. Said,
not here. Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah.
It's fine. She goes, how do you know that? How do you... So as we're walking in, there's the guy out front like this, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's why.
I said to the guy, I said, is that MG safe over there? Ain't nobody going to touch that car.
They do have a parking now. Bob,
now they do. Yeah.
Now they do. Now there's valet parking in the back, so they take care of it. Yes, you don't have to worry there. Yeah.
At that time, I think there were only maybe like a parking lot with maybe 6 spots or something like that.
Oh, now it's huge.
Yeah. I think he took a couple of houses down or something like that.
Yes, I think.
But
he did, yes.
he redid the whole park there.
He did. Okay.
Yeah. We call it Spaghetti Park. That was all junkies there at one time.
Oh, what was it? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Going back, going like the 50s or 60s. But he redid the whole park, and he made a deal with the city to put the bocce courts in there, if I remember the story right.
Yeah.
And that he would maintain the park and keep it nice, and obviously that nobody goes in there. It was not supposed to be in there, right?
No, it's still a great place. It is.
But yeah, you have to. I'm sure Carol knows. My aunt owned a beauty parlor on, I think it was 45th Avenue and 104th Street, Agnes's Beauty Parlor, and I'm sure your wife knows Leonard's Bakery and all those places.
Yeah, Len, I remember. Yes.
Yeah, Leonard's
There was a bakery. There was a bakery in Corona that my father-in-law, Baldi's, I think it was called,
yes.
right on the right on the main road.
Yeah, Baldi's was on 108th Street, where my uncle had his luncheonette there in 64 through the 70s. I worked there during the World's Fair time. It was right down the block where the Precision Place was. Leonard's was where they called, by the L there, by Potash and those places. And my aunt and uncle, they both worked there. And then, like I said, my aunt owned a beauty parlor there. And my other uncle owned Miners Fuel Oil on 108th Street.
I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're, and you have to ask your wife if she knows any Nicoletti's, Scarangella.
Nicoletti's, Scarangella, yes. Well, she didn't grow up there. She grew up she was there. Her grandma lived on one of the streets there, right off 108th Street. I don't remember the street. She was there all the time as a
like
kid.
Us. Yeah,
but
like us.
Lived in Flushing. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean the name sounds familiar, but we were on 47th between 104th and 108th Street. Just another one of those coincidences,
Yes.
And there were
her uncles lived there. She had uncles that lived right in Corona for a while. John Buzzio and his family. They lived near a railroad. There was a railroad there, Bob. Is it the Long Island Railroad? Is that it?
That's the Long Island Railroad, and it was Railroad Avenue ran right along. And I actually interviewed. He called it. He didn't call it Railroad Avenue. He called it something else in the book. But there was another guy from Corona who I interviewed who wrote a book about Corona, which was really based around Railroad Avenue. Right by the L track. Yeah.
I'll have to tell Carol about that. Yes. Yes.
And he talks about a lot of the familiar scenes and places like that. But so the last thing that we have in common is I went to St. John's a few years after you. I went to Queensborough for a couple of years, and then I moved over to St. John's. And one of my best friends, John, he's a CPA, and he lives in Manhasset.
Oh, really?
Yeah. John Imperiali, his name is.
Imperiali. My wife probably knows his family. My wife knows everybody. He lives. Bridge, He lives in. I don't remember the exact street, but he lives on the street where I guess they were Levitt houses, the brick Levitt houses. They're kind of small, and that the streets are real narrow. Right by not too far from the church, like a few blocks from the church over there. Oh yeah, on the same side as the church. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, my wife has a very good friend that just moved out of there a few months ago from that section. We live on the other side. Manhasset has a lot of little villages. There's Munsey Park and Strathmore and Flower Hill, all those on different sides of the boulevard. Yeah. I'll ask my wife if she knows the name Imperiali. I'll ask her.
Yeah, he's been there for probably at least 40 years, I think.
Oh God.
He's been there. He's been there a long time. And
You're
it's a
probably right.
it's a great little section. I mean, you can't get through the street because it's only this wide, but
Yes,
it's nice.
yes, yeah. But it's very private. I'm sure it's very private.
It's very very private, very very nice. Well, this has been a fun trip down memory lane for sure.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
for people listening or people watching, where could they get the book? And you mentioned that you
Well,
have a Facebook group.
yeah, yeah. The book, of course, is at Amazon. They can get the book on Amazon or eBay, but Amazon would be the best place. And on Facebook, I have a page for the book where I every once in a while I'll put a story on and get. I mean, I get hundreds and hundreds of comments because I really put the book. I belong to many of the Italian Facebook groups, and what I do is I then post from the third attic onto those pages. So there's a lot of visibility, and I get a lot of comments, and I really enjoy it. I really do.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And
Oh, it was my privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me involved. I appreciate your help.